All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our exam preparation tactics panel discussion today for all the different levels of Cicerone certification. So we have with us today, I guess, two Master Cicerones. I'm here mostly to moderate. We have an Advanced Cicerone, also a Certified Cicerone. So we are here to talk about what helped us prepare for each level of our exams. And if you have questions as we go along, if you're watching on YouTube, you can put it in the comments. If you're watching on Facebook, you can also type it into the comments and we'll see it. We would love to answer any questions. Well, I won't say any questions. We'd love to answer probably most of the questions that you all have about how you can study for and prepare for any level of the Cicerone certification. So I just started talking at everyone. I am Jen Blair. I am the exam manager for the Cicerone certification program. And like I said, I'll be moderating today. And what I would like to do is have each one of our panelists take a moment to introduce themselves. And I'm going to start with you, Claude.
Oh, you can hear me now. Hi. Claudine Jone-Bourne, actually Dr. Claudine Jone-Bourne. I think out of the panel, I'm the only one that's like not concretely in the beer industry, but I am a certified Cicerone. I started home brewing about more than 10 years ago. I'm recognized as a BJCP judge, and then it just evolved. I wanted to become a Cicerone because I just wanted to get into that other branch of the beer industry, learning more about serving, learning more about pairing, learn about all of that, all of my interests together. Some things that are different about me, some questions you could ask. I'm a mother of four. I'm also a psychiatrist. And I'm not in the beer industry, but one day I do hope to get my own Netflix show talking about beer. High dreams, right?
Right. We were just talking about manifesting, and so there we go. It's out in the universe now.
Yes, it's here.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Katie, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Katie Sloan. I live in New York City. I am an advanced Cicerone. I just passed this July, the tasting portion. Very thrilled. I'm also a nationally ranked BJCP judge. And as Claude indicated, I work in the beer industry. I've been in the industry for about 10 years, homebrewing for about 12. I currently work with Lawson's Finest Liquids. I'm their New York State sales rep. And what else about me? I was super interested in doing the Cicerone program. I picked up a newspaper and found this article about the best pumpkin beers this fall by the first female Master Cicerone. And I said, well, if that's a job you can have, I want it. So I started the process and, I've landed here.
Excellent. Yes. And as we all know, like once you start the process, it's like you just have to keep going. It's like Mount Everest. It's there, right?
It's a little addicting. Yep.
Yeah. All right, Shelly, how about you?
Yes. Hello. I'm Shelly Smith. I work for Sam Adams. I am their senior manager of R&D brewing and operations. So what that means is I manage product development for our Sam Adams and Dogfish Head brands. And then I also oversee the lab ops team who supports a lot of our Beyond Beer portfolio. I've been with Sam for almost 11 years now, which is crazy. It's flown by. And I've been in the beer industry for almost 18 years, which is kind of crazy. So definitely love beer. It is my passion. And so really fun to also embark on this journey to learn a little bit more about every aspect of beer. So excited to share with you all tonight some of the lessons we've learned along the way.
Right. Thank you. And that, like Claude said, I believe I was an advanced Cicerone before I started working in the beer industry. And I used it as, I knew that I would like to work in the industry. And I was kind of working on various ways to sort of build that like skills-based resume to get into the industry. And Cicerone for me was also that great framework. Like Katie and Claude, I also started as a home brewer and, just wanting to learn more about beer, and then going through the Cicerone process was really what I think gave me a leg up into getting into the industry, since it did show that, like, yeah, I'm not in the industry yet, but I'm committed to this, right? So what I would like to start out by asking each one of you is, and we're going to like start with kind of the hard hitting questions. What would you say out of like the various syllabus areas that you could be tested on, which one do you think, or which one did you feel was your biggest weakness when you got started? And Claude, I will start with you.
I'm trying to think about what the biggest weakness would have been. I think ironically it might have been maybe the styles, which is like counterintuitive. It's the way that it's not just like whether you know the styles or not, it's the way they ask about it. And you kind of second guess yourself like, yeah, I know what this is. And then the way they ask it is like, oh, didn't think about that aspect of it. So I think to me, even though that's kind of like the bread and butter, that's probably what would have tripped me up the most out of anything is how they ask those questions.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely see that. I remember one of the questions just saying like something about continental style. And I was like, I could not think of the answer. So I just wrote something and I was like, I know, like I left a little note, like, I know that this is wrong. Like, I just need you to know that I know that about my answer. So Katie, how about you? What area do you think was your biggest weakness?
My biggest weakness going into probably starting the program was draft systems, because I was working in bars. So I kind of had like a sense of beer style, not like in a broad sense, but I was learning and I was like, I can taste a bunch of beer that I can handle. But learning about like constriction and like the science about, draft systems was a huge challenge for me. So then I took it upon myself and my partner built a kegerator, and that helped give me the leg up on draft systems. But I think that's the one, like, if you don't work as a draft tech and you don't work in a bar in like a cooler, where are you going to get those skills? That's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I agree. That was definitely draft systems. And Shelly, I know that I anticipate that will also be yours too. But what do you think was your weakest area?
Actually, I'm going to say food and beer pairing for me. I am very analytical. And so I feel like some of the other sections, it was easier for me to like know what resources to go to or understand the systems or how things were structured. And for me, the food and beer pairing section for a long time just felt very fluid and like more on the creative side and just a little bit less structured. And so it took a while for me to understand like concepts and really put sort of wrap my brain around how that worked. And I think just kind of learning how to frame it in a way that made sense to me. So for me, that was definitely the section that I found the most challenging. Yeah,
I know draft systems, I would say would be my first, but beer pairing was definitely a close second for the same reason. It seems a little squishier. So I'm interested then, and Shelly, I'll start with you this time. How did you prepare for the beer and food pairing? And let's talk kind of broadly, and then we'll kind of get a little bit more specific with how you prepared for the Master Cicerone beer and food pairing.
Yeah, sure. I think there were a few things that I did. Some of it was just study menus, like reading through menus, thinking about how recipes were constructed and how like, restaurants would put together different elements of a dish, and then kind of translating that into the way the elements of a beer might be put together. And so then starting to look for like bridges between those food and beer pairings. So studying menus was one piece that I utilized. I think another is finding other people who are experts in that area and leaning on them. So I had a study group, and one individual that was in my study group was Mandy Naglich, who's an advanced Cicerone. She is great at food and beer pairings. And so we studied together. And there were other areas that maybe I was stronger in that could help her out. And so I found that also to be super helpful to kind of share our knowledge and work together in, bettering both of our sort of overall canons of knowledge.
Okay, cool. And Katie, I say we have a special guest, as we kind of thought we might.
We anticipated it.
Yeah.
Her name is Vienna. She doesn't like it when I talk, so she'll probably jump down in a minute. Yeah, she's not happy now. She likes me silent.
But yeah, well, tell us a little bit about how you prepared for the beer and food pairing.
Sure. So I was lucky enough I studied nutrition in college and ended up taking a bunch of cooking classes. So I felt pretty prepared with like the food preparation section, which was really helpful because then once you have, like Shelly said, the breakdown of how that food is prepared, you can find those similar notes and flavors in beers once you have the beer knowledge, right? So you kind of take, oh, like I want an herbal beer with herbal hops to pair with this herbal dish because, and then find those opposites as well. But I think having the knowledge of food preparation was super helpful. I say take a cooking class and then find those similar flavors in your styles. I think if you do those two studies separately, that can come together pretty simply.
Nice. That's very good. And I know I had another friend who has a culinary degree. And so for me, the food pairing, like I said, was a challenge, and just kind of showing my work when I was trying to, to work it out and say it out loud or put pen to paper on what that could be like. And it was the same thing. Like she was just very fluid with that because that's where she had a lot of experience with it. So Claude, how did you prepare for the beer and food for the certified exam?
If I'm not mistaken, we didn't really have, I think there was of course beer and food pairing, but it wasn't to the extent of like the advanced or the master by far. So I think for me, it was mostly just knowing the basics, like what goes with what, like in terms of like salt and this and sweet with this and
Right.
what is bitter. So it was for if you're doing a certified Cicerone, it's a lot more basic than that. It's kind of just knowing like what elements of certain foods go with what elements, as opposed to kind of like the minutia of like what kind of flavors. Because I saw like the syllabus. I looked at the syllabus for the master and advanced, and I was like, whoa, I've never even heard of some of those ingredients. I can't wait. Yeah,
Get ready.
Yeah, it's the train that keeps going. But yeah, ours is kind of more elementary, like the building blocks to like, once you know the building blocks, then you can get to like the names of each food and whatever what comes from those.
Yeah, and I have to agree. I know it was really like once I got to the master level that I really spent time thinking about, okay, how am I going to approach this? And, like I had a strategy for like doing the essays and for doing the tasting. And here's, if I'm sitting down to do a practice tasting, here's my whole routine. And I had never done that with food pairing. And so taking the time to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to start with, intensity. Like that's going to be, kind of like beer has 4 main ingredients and just kind of starting there at the very top and then working my way down. I found that so helpful for really getting all of those concepts together and making sure that I was giving like a complete answer. Because that was definitely one of my weaker points. And I remember getting a culinary dictionary and just like over lunch, I would sit there and just read through it because I didn't have that kind of exposure to, to like food preparation. Is like, I make the same 5 things, and like every day. So I'm not out like, at like a Michelin starred restaurant or something. So one of the other questions I wanted to ask you all is give us an idea of kind of what a typical study session looked like for you. And Katie, I'm going to start with you this time.
Sure. A typical study session. I'm a very visual, hands-on person, so I had to take notes. I'd go through and highlight the chapter I was reading in whichever book I was choosing to dive into that night. And then go back through the chapter and take notes on what I already highlighted. I'd probably give myself an hour and a half to 2 hours so I wouldn't overwhelm myself, but keep it as much intensity as possible. And for the advanced specifically, I think I signed up about 6 months before the written and did like really 4 months of intense, like 3 to 4 nights a week studying. But I did give myself some breaks, so I had time to digest, and because that's key. And there was always a beer with me because otherwise, what am I doing? If I'm reading about beer, I got to be drinking one too.
Right. And I think that's a really good point, and something that I also remind people of and had to remind myself of is, when you feel like you're hitting a wall, just stop, give yourself some grace, take a break, because at that point, like incrementally, are you actually gaining more knowledge, or are you just thinking about like how tired you are or how you don't want to be doing it anymore? speaking from my personal experience. So that I think that is really important of just, understanding like it doesn't need to be, 60 hours a week of studying for any of the levels. It's more just about managing it like within your, just within your day-to-day life. So Claude, what would your typical study session look like? Because like you mentioned, you're a mother, you're a psychiatrist, you're not in beer. So I think that presents a little bit more of a challenge.
Yeah. So it was more of like when I had free time to do things, and I just enjoyed the topic so much that it was kind of like, even though it was work, it was still my reprieve. So I think the way I used to study was just kind of trying to get through everything. So I had what I wanted to do, but the things I wanted to get through were all like reading tests. So I did like a lot of the, it was the Road to Cicerone series. I really liked those because it kind of chopped up your day, where it was like, you read, you tested, you read, you tested, you read, you tested. And if I didn't feel like I tested enough, there was, other resources where I could do more testing. So I felt like I just did what I could. And then like informally, any opportunity was a time to like study, but not really study. So I went to a bar, or I went, to a brewery. I took notes in my head, like, what is this like? What is that like? Even if they didn't have a beer pairing at a restaurant, I like to eat out now, Jen. I go to the Michelin star restaurant.
I know you do.
I challenge them and I would say, hey, what kind of beers do you have? Like, and I do things like that. So I like to do I had to do a lot of informal stuff because I didn't have that concrete time to like sit down and actually make that part of my day.
Right. And I love that, just the idea of it doesn't have to be, sitting down at a desk, and it can be, but it doesn't have to be. And there's so many experiential opportunities out there. So that link I have on the screen, Claude had referred to our Road to Cicerone courses. That's the link where you can go and find more information about those. I know I loaned all of my Road to Cicerone books to a friend because I've been studying long enough that I have the hard copy versions. Now they're virtual. But those were so helpful. And you're exactly right. Like, especially on those days when I knew that I just really wasn't in the mood to study, but I felt like I had to do something. Those were so good for being able to pull up, like you said, and just do like a quick session. And then it's, then I'm done and I feel like I've done something for the day. So Shelly, what about you? What would a typical study day look like for you?
Yeah, I think it would vary because obviously there's a lot of different components to study, but I think it's important to kind of mix it up. So one day might be more like focused on the hands-on piece. One day might be focused more on like reading through some of the books or restudying my notes that I'd taken from what I'd read. But for me, I put together a pretty intensive schedule for the 6 months leading up to the exam, and kind of broke it out by the 5 main topics. And then within that had sort of high level by week, some of the topics that I wanted to study. And then I'd make it even more granular, like at the beginning of the week, be like, okay, these are the 5 topics I want to study. How do I want to study those? Is it like text that I want to read, or notes that I want to restudy, or flashcards that I want to go through, or whatever? So blocking it out like that for me helped me make sure I was hitting all the key things, but then also like holding myself accountable. So, okay, I said I was going to do these 15 things, make sure I can check them all off the list by the end of the week. So I think that helped too. It's just, helping me to kind of put a plan together and being a little bit less overwhelmed. Obviously, it's a huge canon of knowledge. So like trying to figure out where to start. So breaking it down in that way, just by using the syllabus and then parsing it out, I think was really helpful in terms of making it a little bit more manageable.
Yeah, I definitely did the same thing with advanced and master, where I had a color-coded spreadsheet that like each week I would sit down and I would put in like, okay, these are the 8 hours a day that I'm working, or like these are the meetings I have. And then the same thing, like, these are the areas I know I need to focus on. And so just shuffling those in, like maybe 30-minute increments, maybe 2-hour increments. And that was really good because it did make it less overwhelming. Like you said, it was just more like, okay, I do have time to hit these things. And it also gave me the chance that like, if something was really stressing me out, I could always go into my schedule. And like, let's say I woke up this morning and, I don't feel like I know anything about spontaneous fermentation. So I could like go to, like, well, that was going to be a Thursday thing and now it's going to be a Monday thing. And so I can just swap these things out. And for me, it also helped keep me honest in terms of studying the subjects that I didn't want to study because they were my weak areas. Like I was very bad about that. And that helped me be like, okay, you need to do this. And kind of the same thing. Like if I only have to do it for 30 minutes, then I can handle that. Even as much as I hate it, like I'll still work on it, and I'll still make sure that I'm not only studying the things that I like to study. So I would say another question for you all would be what resources you found to be most helpful. And that can be kind of broad if there's, one that's like very specific, anything like that. And Shelly, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah. I think there were a few. There's definitely a handful of books that I've read multiple times. So those are definitely my go-tos. Like Cellarmanship was one. The BA draft manual, I have probably read cover to cover 8 times. So that was a huge helpful resource. For food and beer pairing, I think Julia Hertz and Gwen Conley's book, I think it's called Tasting Beer, or Beer Pairings, is really good. So yeah, I think there were a handful of books that I found I would go back to several times. And so those were really great. I think also YouTube videos are awesome, especially if you don't have the opportunity to get to some of the breweries to see certain things in person. It's a really great option for kind of still seeing things, in action versus just reading about them in a textbook. I think it's helpful to kind of see it and remember it that way. And then obviously any hands-on experience you can get if you have the opportunity to get into a brewery, put your hands on a draft system, like play around with a cask. Anytime you can have that sort of opportunity to get that hands-on experience, it obviously is going to stick. And I think, helps you to really understand things at a deeper level. So that's always really helpful when you can do that too.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I will share for those of you watching a couple of the Cicerone if you're on YouTube right now, so you know that Cicerone has a YouTube channel, but a couple of our playlists that I think are super, super helpful are the Certified Beer Server Prep Talks and also the Tasting Together series. These I remember watching, and I used them all the way through studying for Master, just because there's a ton of great information in there. And it really kind of, I think it goes toward, and I know somebody had a comment, and Claude, you had said the same thing, kind of understanding how to present your knowledge. And I think that these playlists are really good for that in terms of, understanding like kind of how to structure your answers. And like I said, how to demonstrate that knowledge. Selfishly, I'm also going to I have a Cicerone playlist on YouTube that has all of the videos that I found the most helpful for studying for advanced and master. So mine is under the Genfluence on YouTube. And then you can see that Cicerone playlist that's open for everybody. But it's got, cask, off flavors, fermentation, all sorts of things that I found super helpful in preparing. So Katie, how about you in terms of resources?
Resources. Well, Shelly named a couple, definitely the draft manual. My cover's falling off. And that thing is highlighted and falling apart. That was a huge, I've read that before every test at least 3 times. So highly recommend. Also the Cellar Mastership was great to talk about cask, because again, something that if you're not working in a brewery, and even if you do work in a brewery, you don't get hands-on experience with the casks very often. So that was super helpful. Also Tasting Beer by Rainey Mosier was like my start, my middle, my end. It just It has what you need in it. So I definitely went through that book multiple times. Again, cover falling off, sticky notes everywhere, the whole shebang. And then I think my best resource was actually the other people, in my beer environment in the city. I was lucky enough to be helping lead the BGCP training class. So very style focused training, but having the conversations with other people about the beer styles while you're tasting them is so key. So, I think use the other knowledgeable people, or even unknowledgeable, but people interested and excited to talk about beer, because you'll get so much more out of it and so much more interesting responses than you would with like just people who are always doing it. So I think those are my best resources.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. And I've never really been a study group person, but Shelly and I were kind of like we were a study group in a way that worked for us to be a study group. But it was really helpful when I could have those conversations with other people, or even just like particularly with my best friend. She was also preparing for master, and we had just kind of a safe space where I remember one time texting her and being like, I cannot for the life of me remember how lager fermentation works, and her just being like, okay, like tell me what you know. And, us just kind of talking through it. So I think that is really valuable to be able to have those kinds of conversations, and also being able to, when you have to like teach someone a concept, that just helps you learn it so much more. So Claude, what were some of the resources, like some of your favorite study resources?
I was laughing when Katie was talking about the tasting beer book. I had the audio book, and that, like, when I tell you, like, I had to do things like on the fly, like I was just listening to this man, like, and the beer this, and I think the yeah. So I like that. I'm kind of like a completionist, so it almost felt like video gaming for like studying. So I did the beer savvy online course with the test. I did I have all my little badges here.
Nice.
I did all those, all the online courses. I felt those were helpful. So I did it like completionist type things. And I think it's kind of easier with the Certified Cicerone to do those tick mark things. I also read the water, yeast, hops, that whole series. That was helpful. I really liked that. But I think it's kind of different. Like once you get past my level, it's like more detail oriented. But I felt like just having like basic things, like whatever they said with the basics, they really were true. Like try to read those things, try to get through those things.
Definitely so. And yeah, like I mentioned, that's something for me going through the levels that I really had to, like I said, like show my work. And, and like kind of start very broad and then narrow it down. But even structuring your answers like that is so helpful for that. And so I know somebody had asked about the books and everything we're talking about. So I'm trying to pull those up as we get them. But this first link that I have is the draft quality manual from the Brewers Association. This is for keeping and serving all the way through master level. You'll need the draft quality manual. It's available as a free PDF on the Brewers Association website. You can also order a hard copy if you would prefer hard copy, and I think it's fairly inexpensive. And I'll also, for some of the other books, this was just the one I knew I could get to closely, but I can compile a list of the different resources and stuff that we have that we're mentioning throughout this, and we'll post it in along with the YouTube video. So for those of you who are wondering which ones we're talking about, we'll make sure that we have that added to the notes for you. So you'll be able to find that.
Jen, I'm going to jump in with one other resource that I think is, kind of obvious in retrospect, but the syllabus, looking at what is going to be tested and really keeping it focused to that. It's very easy to go down a rabbit hole, especially as you start getting into these more advanced levels. And so sometimes when I would start to be like, whoa, I feel like I'm way off track, I'd go back to the syllabus and be like, okay, what are we actually getting tested on, and go back and look at that. And then I actually took that syllabus and built it out. So every topic that's listed, I'd put everything that I had. So I have like 350-page syllabus at this point, but would build it out. And so then I also made sure I was covering every topic that was on there. But I think that's also really helpful to kind of go back and level set of what am I studying against. So.
Yes. And thank you for mentioning that. That's an excellent point. And when I was doing my study schedule each week for advanced and for master, at the beginning of each week, I set aside 30 minutes to review the syllabus and would go through and read the syllabus, and anything that would, I would think like, oh, I don't know what a spule boy is, or, or whatever. I would just make a note of that. And that's also kind of what helped guide me through what topics I was going to study that week. And it's also really great because when you go back the next week, you can see like, oh, I'm ready to answer questions about this. And as you continue to revisit the syllabus, or, as I did, and, I found that there were fewer and fewer points that I was like, oh, I'm not so sure about that. So that is an excellent point. And one thing I think that applies to all levels is when you're studying, if you feel like you're going down a rabbit hole, you are. And so it's always good to revisit, the syllabus to make sure, like, am I going to be asked about the soil pH in a hop field? Probably not. Like, I don't need to be stressing out about this, which was an actual thing that I did stress out about. So I say that from experience. So we have, we'll start doing a few questions here. We have a question from Aloe about the AC exam. He said, do you feel it's more intensive in actually debunking the material and deep diving into certain areas of the syllabus? So Katie, Shelly.
Sure. So it is more intensive than the Certified Cicerone, for sure, but it's all the same subjects. So it's kind of, just widening your base knowledge on those like couple, key pillars. I think, it's a little bit more tricky when they're asking you about, beer styles. I would say the tasting exam specifically is way higher level. Definitely prepare for that. I think off flavors are a lot more of a challenge. Style differentiation, those are the tasting notes. And then you have that oral component, which was new for the advanced, which I was extremely nervous about. And that was also like, you have to have the style knowledge for that one. That was a challenge for sure. But yes, I think you really want to deep dive into your tasting, your style knowledge, and then everything else as well. Know that you're going to have to write, 5 essays, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
have the
know,
words.
Yeah. The first time I took the advanced exam, and I say the first time because with the exception of the certified beer server exam, I had to retake each one of the exam levels a few times. And by the time I passed the advanced exam, like, I looked back at me going into the exam in 2017 and was like, I had no business being there, just the going in. And definitely as the levels progress, I find that, like, there is some rote memorization for each one of the levels, and being, very good at reading and, like outlines and things like that is definitely helpful. But as you get farther up, you do need to have more of that, like, experiential, experience, I guess, to kind of tie everything together. So Shelly, what about you? What do you think about about Aloe's question?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it is going to be, deeper levels of knowledge, a little bit more in depth on all of the kind of main topics or sections of the syllabus. The tasting is more difficult. There's more off flavors to test. And then the style differentiation is a little bit more challenging versus the certified level. So yeah, it's kind of, expressing that knowledge at a deeper level, wider kind of array of topics across some of those sections. And yeah, so I think totally agree with Katie.
Perfect. So let me go back through, because I know you both touched on tasting. And I know we have some questions about tasting and practicing. So let me scroll back through. So one of the things that Mind Fixation is asking, we have in-person off-flavor tastings. Do you feel it would be worth traveling to attend one of these? And I'll say briefly, if you're not familiar, if you're watching, Cicerone does do in-person off-flavor courses that the ones we are offering now are more aimed at the certified level, but I'm of the opinion that anytime you get the opportunity to practice your off flavors, take it. But we do have those around the country, and I will, in just a second, I'll put up the link for you all also to find if there's an off flavor course coming near you. I will also say quickly that if you are interested in an off flavor course and maybe there's not one near you, you can shoot us an email. And, if we know that there is a good amount of people in an area who are interested, we will do our best to be able to offer a course there. So I will ask all of you, I'm not sure if any of you have done like any of our in-person off flavor tastings. I know Shelly and I did the week-long intensive with Aroxa, but what are your thoughts in terms of being able to attend the off-flavor tastings? I'll let anybody jump in.
I guess I could talk about the opposite, which is like doing an off-flavor tasting, but remotely.
Perfect.
So they do offer one for the certified Cicerone level, and I felt that was just incredibly helpful. I know me and you talked, or you had asked us about doing the off-flavor testing without like the formal kits, but I felt like that kit was kind of clutch, right? Because that's what they would use. You can kind of simulate the testing. And I even felt like it's more about getting not just the off flavor itself and identifying, you know, what butter tastes like, but also like what exactly does that compound taste like and what does it feel like? Like some of them I couldn't even smell it. I can only feel it I can only do it retronasally. So it was really important for me to like get the standards that they provided. So even if you didn't do it in person, I guess at least for the certified level, you can kind of get a good experience with the online experience that they offer.
Yeah, and so thank you. The first one that I have down here, this is the tutored webinar that Claude was just referring to. This is, I'm sorry, you did the single user, right? Or did you do the full 12 person?
Oh no, I did. I actually did the newer single user one that they had,
perfect.
And I thought that was great. Yeah.
So that one is this is our single user off flavor kit, and these I think are absolutely fantastic because, like Claude said, they are set up to where you can dose them into like 300 mils of beer. You can do it on your own, as opposed to this other one that I'll show you. This is the basic off flavor kit that can be up to 12 people. And I know, and with the off flavors, what I did with Master, because having a liter of diacetyl beer like isn't that fun. But sometimes you want to practice a little bit more. So one thing that I did for Master that's is a little off book use, but I ordered 1/2 gallon milk jugs from Amazon and mixed the standards in those, like mix the full liter standards in those, and took painter's tape and labeled the bottom of each one of the milk cartons and just kept them in my refrigerator. So for like a few weeks, I had a very weird looking refrigerator where you would open it and it was just 1/2 gallons, like a dozen of beer. But I could use that and, go in and like mix them up. And that way I could test myself blindly and not, and that, like, obviously I knew it was going to be one of the 12 flavors that I had mixed, but that was really, really good for me that maybe a couple times a day, I would just take like 15 minutes, pour, taste through and put them back in the refrigerator. And I think I kept each one for like maybe 3 days, and like, it's not ideal. That's not like its intended purpose. And, like the beer kind of goes a little flat after a while, and but the flavors themselves really hold pretty well, throughout that time. So that was one way when I invested in the full kit, I was able to really extend that a little bit longer. And then I could also, the ones that I had trouble with, I could kind of group those in one spot, mix those up and try it again. So that was one of the ways that I was able to kind of stretch that, because like you said, it's being able to use the Aroxa flavor standards. That's what is used on the exam. So I think at some point for certified and above, you do need to invest in either a kit for yourself, a kit for a group, or coming to an off flavor class to practice that. And, because like Claude said, they're going to be the same standards. So you're going to have a very similar experience when you show up on exam day as when you've been practicing on your own. And I was just talking a lot. So Katie and Shelly, off flavor training, what are some of your in-person classes, studying alone, what worked for you? Katie, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure thing. I think, again, I kind of said it earlier, I think the most important thing is tasting it with people, because you never know what somebody else is going to say that's going to resonate with you, that like you've been tasting all along and they've just put it into words that you didn't have. And it could be from somebody who's doing an off-flavor kit for the first time. It could be from somebody who's, for me, I did it with some beer judge buddies one time. Another time I did it with like the class was like training people. So like I led the discussion, and having both really helped me narrow in on my terminology and what I'm experiencing with those off flavors. So for me, that was like key, was having other people in the space tasting the same thing I was tasting at the same time to have that conversation. So if the original question was like, should I travel for the class? If you don't have anybody near you that's going to do it with you, then yes, it is worth it. If you have people nearby, bring them together, whether they think they know off flavors or not, you're going to get good feedback.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I know I've seen somebody in the comments had also just suggested like Pink Boots. If you're a member of Pink Boot Society, will do that. I know that a lot of times like your state guilds might have off flavor courses, or you can even, local homebrew clubs. I know I've done off flavor training with my homebrew clubs, and that's also a great place if you're looking to like do the bigger 12-person kit. Homebrew club is a great place to find a willing participants to like everybody kicks in $20 and you do this off flavor training. So those are really good. And I would also recommend, maybe just asking around in your local brewing community. I know one of my friends owns a brewery. She does a lot of flavor training for her staff. And also when she has the capacity, will open it up to people she knows are studying for Cicerone or, who need that practice. And then the other thing is, Shelly, I promise I will let you go in a second, but I don't want to forget this. The other thing, talking about homebrew clubs, 3 of us on here are BJCP judges. Beer judging is absolutely the best way to train your palate. And, you have to really, if you've got like 10 beers in front of you and they all say they're an English porter, like you kind of learn like 8 slightly different ways how not to make an English porter. And you're like, you really have to like analyze, okay, is this the style? Is it not? And why not? And then you're also leaving feedback for if it's not to style, or if there's a flaw in it, you learn like this is what might cause some of these flaws. So definitely, look into like any BJCP judging opportunities you have, because you also get pretty good off flavor training with those a lot of times as well. You kind of get like off flavors in the wild. So Shelly, what about you in terms of off flavor training?
Yeah, I think, obviously any opportunity you have to practice is always worth it. So I do think it's valuable to take courses if you have the opportunity to do so. And I do think it's worth the travel. Jen mentioned we both took the week-long Araxa class, and it's really a lot of it is about the repetition, like just constantly training your brain of what is that aroma, what is that taste, so that it just becomes kind of second nature. I think the other thing, again, not exactly orthodox, but understanding like the spikes are expensive. So there are other ways you can think about, kind of training towards those same flavor profiles, like smell vinegar, you can buy diacetyl on Amazon, smell squash, smell pumpkins, like just get used to those aromas too, to kind of help with that. It's obviously not perfect. You're not tasting it in beer necessarily, but it can still be a way to kind of start to train on those different profiles.
Yeah, and that's another really great point of, you've got, it's not free because you bought it at some point, but you have accessible flavor training in your kitchen in terms of smelling your spices, smelling fruits. I've even like, ma'am, please stop touching all the produce at the grocery store. Like you can there's so many opportunities that you have that are also, not just the off flavor kit, but opportunities to build your descriptive vocabulary. And I also really like having all of those opportunities to train your palate that isn't necessarily imbibing alcohol. And as we know, when you're studying for the exam, drinking beer is different than like studying for an exam. You're just doing a few ounces here and there. But I found that, you don't have to be drinking beer or drinking alcohol to be studying for the tasting portion of your exam on any level. And I do see we also have a question from Freezy, and I will show this briefly and I can answer this for you about the Aroxa off flavor training. They don't have the dates announced for 2024 yet, but they will be doing one. Typically, Aroxa will do their week-long practical beer taster training the week before the Master Cicerone exam. So I will get, in just a second, I will see if I can grab at least the Aroxa website for you all that you can go and check it out to see when they announce when the course will be. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that, the Aroxa Practical Beer Taster Training is a week-long intensive training course. And it's aimed at like a lot of various levels. I know I took it for the first time when I was getting ready for my advanced exam. You definitely don't have to take the course, but if you are looking at advanced or master, I would plan, if you can, to be able to attend that. It is expensive. It is a week that you're not at work, but it is completely a game changer. And really, anybody in the industry looking for that really intensive training, it's really fantastic. So let me find one of our other questions here. So we have a question from Garrett, and this will be, I guess, Shelly, this will be for you and me, but how do you go about memorizing all of those stats for the master exam?
Oh yeah, it's a good one.
How many times do you dream about stats?
I was like, oh my gosh,
so
many. So I did a few things. I made flashcards for every style that had the specs and my commercial examples. I then also, and I got this tip from Max Finance, recorded myself reading every single one of those flashcards. And then I made audio files and then would shuffle them. So anytime I was anywhere, if I was like going for a run, I don't have a car, but if I was in a rental car driving, if I was on the train going to work, I would listen to that on repeat and just like, so it was always like kind of reminding me of those specs. And then I just did the flashcards all the time. And then I also had the flashcards. I made electronic copies on my phone. So then I had this like app that I would just flip through. So if I was like waiting for a meeting to start, I'd like start flipping through these flashcards. So it was just constant. I have gone through that stack of flashcards thousands of times. And I think also try to think of little tricks. Like I tell myself little stories, and I will not tell you any of them because they're so ridiculous, but making up absolutely ridiculous stories about why, this is the color SRM for a Belgian wit. And like, if you make these stories, then sometimes it can kind of help. So that was another trick that I used for some of them that I struggled to remember.
Yes, I also have very insane stories about beers in my head that I told myself to help me remember. And I think one of the things so I'm not really like a flashcards person. So what I did was I made myself worksheets, and for each one of the styles. So for context, for the Master Cicerone, there are about 105 beer styles where you need to memorize the stats like ABV, IBU, SRM. And as somebody who very probably would have passed the second time she took the master exam if she would have memorized the stats like she knew she was supposed to and did not, that can make a very big difference in your score. So, like take it from your pal Jen, just like rip the Band-Aid off and memorize the stats, because that will definitely help you going into the exam. But the way that I broke up the worksheets was I had a worksheet for ABV, one for IBU, one for SRM, and I had them in two ways. On one, I had the beer style listed, and then I had columns for the lower and upper parameters. And then on the other one, I had the parameters listed and not the beer styles. And so I would go through, and for me, leading up to my master retake this time, just every morning, that was like the first 30 minutes of my day that I would sit down with these worksheets and just go through and write them down. And that was actually really helpful for me as well for advanced, was kind of learning. I think about it as kind of learning your flashcards backwards, where I would start with the stats and look at the stats and say, okay, what is this beer style? Rather than looking at the beer style and reciting the stats. Because as you can see, we've got the practice exams on the website. That's usually how you're going to be asked a question like that. Looking at the practice exam, you're not there. Nobody's probably going to ask you to sit down and fill out a table of all of the stats for all of the beer styles. but you might be asked, this is a continental lager with this SRM. And learning the stats backwards that way was really helpful going into the exam and not having to kind of like retool or reverse engineer while I was there. But I agree with Shelly, you just have to do it, and you have to do it in whatever way works for you. And that, and I have the audio files of myself reciting them, which I actually like uploaded to iTunes. And so that way I could listen to them on my app, and I forgot about it. And like one day put my music on shuffle and then all of a sudden it's like me saying like alt beer, going through, and I was like, what is this? This sounds terrible. But yeah, so I recommend that as well. And I also did Quizlet, same thing, like just had it on my phone. So if I'm sitting on a plane or something, I can just sit there and go through that really quickly. And it really is just that repetition. So let's see what other kinds of questions we have. All right, here we go. What advice do you have on writing essays for the advanced Cicerone? And how about the oral exam? So Katie, you're the closest to your advanced Cicerone on here. So what is your advice for approaching the essays?
Ooh, approach on the essays. Well, I made sure, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, all the essay questions are kind of posted, right? Am I thinking of the wrong test?
I think you might be thinking of BJCP.
I am. So those were all posted. Okay, so that was a different one. But this one, you knew what subjects, the general subjects that they were looking for the essays themselves. I can't say, I did practice writing essays for the national exam for BJCP, which helped lead me into the advanced training. But I, specifically beer and food pairings, I really, when I went out, I would pair beer with food, whether I'm getting beer or not, when I'm making dinner, I'd be pairing in my mind, deciding like what style, what malt base, what hop profile I want. So that was kind of that essay. I feel like there was also, in the vein of draft systems. So just reading through that and having very specific formulas memorized. So I didn't have to like struggle to recall them, but I knew them and could then apply them to that subject. And then I definitely like flopped on one essay. I think the question was something, I'm not going to give a question, but like I had to recall a beer. I made up a beer. I made up a completely made up beer. And the essay was good. The beer was not real.
I've been in that boat. You're selling the sizzle, right?
And it was literally the comments like, this beer sounds delicious, but it doesn't exist. I said, okay, well, I got some credit.
Yes.
So that was like my full panic moment when I was writing essays was, oh my God, I don't have an actual real answer, but I pushed through and I made sure like I understood, the beer styles so I could describe a beer that I've never tasted to somebody. So I think one, make sure you have the pillars set up, but two, don't panic. Even if you can fill it in with real information on a fake subject, it might work. I wouldn't recommend it. It was definitely my lowest essay, but I made it through. Yeah, and then what was the second part of that question, Jen? It was
what about the oral exam?
Oh, the oral exam.
For the oral exam.
That was really nerve-wracking, but I would honestly have my partner ask me general questions that we, could assume were what direction we were going in for the oral questions, and then time myself so I could make sure I hit A through C on the oral exam. Like there's certain, points you want to hit within the time frame without, completely sputtering out. So those are my pieces of advice. Yeah.
Excellent. And one of the things that I'm sharing right here is one of our blog posts, and this is something that we send to advanced Cicerone candidates on, how to talk about. This is specifically about beer style knowledge, but it's really good in terms of giving you an idea of, again, like how you should phrase your answer, what kind of information your proctor is looking for you to give. And it's great for advanced and master. Shelly, how did you go about prepping for the essays for advanced? And I would say probably also master too.
Yeah. I think one of the things too is when you're reading the essay to really think about what it's asking. And so, I would read the essay and kind of plot out like, okay, what do I want to talk about, and sort of almost frame out my answer before actually starting to write. Because you want to make sure you're answering the question that they're asking and not necessarily just throwing all your knowledge that you have on that particular topic. Also for just time constraint, you only have so much time. So really wanting to use your time wisely. So that was part of it. And then going back after I wrote it and reading back the question, like, did I answer all these parts? So I think that's a key piece. In prepping for the oral, I totally agree. Practice was really helpful. I would have coworkers ask me questions and sit with them and try to do 15 minutes. And it was so awkward and you feel ridiculous. And you're like, oh my gosh, what if they ask me something and I don't know anything and I'm going to feel like super unprepared. But having those experiences before you actually go into the exam is really helpful to kind of build your confidence and help you to feel like, okay, I know this, like I know my material, I've studied, like, let me just go in and just do what I need to do. So I think practicing as much as you can is really helpful.
Yeah. And that the advice to answer the question that you're asked is key. I say, as a person who I don't even know what happened. I think I just decided that I was going to be asked something. And so going into master for the first time, that was the answer I gave. And that was not the question that was asked. And I did terribly on that. That was one of my lowest scoring questions ever. And one thing that helped me in terms of the essays and making sure, like Shelly and Katie both said, that you're structuring them such that you're actually answering the question asked and you've covered everything. I like to follow, it's the IRAC method. So that's IRAC, and it's issue, rule, analysis, conclusion. That was something that I learned in law school for the bar exam. Same idea of making sure that you're answering the question. So if you're asked a question about like DMS, you can say like, DMS is formed XYZ, right? Like that's your rule. And then you can explain that and then you conclude. And following that was really helpful for me to make sure that I was structuring my answers in a coherent way and that I was actually answering the question being asked, because it is very easy. And like Katie said too, like just kind of staying calm. It's very easy to just kind of spiral really quickly and, not realize what exactly it is you're doing. So I think we've got just a couple more questions or a couple more minutes. I know we've got a couple more questions. So Eric wants to know any suggestions for those of us that do not pick up DMS or diacetyl. I would say first, that's kind of a double-edged sword, because I remember being very excited that I could pick up diacetyl. Or learning, once you learn, you can pick up diacetyl, and then you pick up diacetyl and realize like, wow, a lot of places really don't clean their draft lines. So I think for me, Eric, one of the first things I would recommend is, a lot of times it's just a matter of practicing and continuing to practice a lot more. And, chances are eventually you'll be able to pick it up. It may not be like your strongest one. Like I'm not very strong with DMS, but I just learned to practice in different ways. And on the Cicerone playlist that I had shared earlier, I have several of the Aroxa flavor videos on there. And one of them is DMS. And in those videos, they're really short. They're like 5 minutes long. And Dr. Bill Simpson goes through like, this is DMS, this is what causes it, here's how you can assess it. So I would definitely suggest checking those out as well, because different aromas we're going to be able to pick up in different ways. And then again, just like practice. And it's very likely that as you continue to practice, you'll be able to pick those up eventually. But I know it was tough for me too. With DMS especially, but even like just learning the off flavors, keeping DMS and diacetyl straight the first time I went in to take my certified. So any of you have like weak areas in terms of flavor. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say I could finally answer something. I can talk now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that whether it's DMS or any other off flavors, like what do you mean by pick up, right? So you often think like I have to smell this or just taste this, but it can be I can feel this, right? Especially with diacetyl, I can feel this, or I can, or it's like how you're doing it. Like I think I mentioned earlier, either with you all or in this chat, like the retronasal, like where do you pick it up? So I would kind of stretch yourself, like when you're saying just pick it up, like what are you defining as picking up, and using your other senses to kind of pick up that flavor, and using the standards will help with that too, because you know whether you're picking it up or not.
Right. And this also, Claude wrote a really great blog post about how she passed her certified Cicerone exam. So that is also the link that is being shared right now at the bottom. So I encourage you to also go read that for the certified exam. And it was so great when I was reading it. It took me back to like, oh man, yep, I remember that feeling going into the certified exam. All right. So the very last question, if you all have just a couple minutes, I think this will be specifically for Shelly. How did you study style tasting for master?
Great question. This is also a lot of repetition, which obviously is really challenging. And I hate how much beer I dumped down the drain, but you can't possibly finish every sample that you try. So yeah, I every chance I had, I would taste styles blindly. It was a challenge because I live by myself. So trying to blind taste myself, I had a whole system. It was ridiculous. I would buy cans as much as possible because that like eliminated, I kind of know this has a foil top or whatever. But then I would just get out 3 or 4, I'd close my eyes, I'd bump around the sink, like pour them over the sink with my eyes closed, and then number the cups. It was ridiculous. But I think just as much repetition as you can get. And then I would also try to utilize samples for more than one thing. So if I set up a blind panel for myself, then that night for dinner, I'd try each of those 4 beers or 6 beers with dinner and work on food and beer pairing so that I could utilize those samples for more than one thing. So I think, that was part of it. And then, obviously you're giving up a lot of social time to study. So when I would go out with friends, I'd be like, okay, somebody order me a beer. Don't tell me what it is. And so you can kind of still bring studying into your social aspect. So I think just, as much repetition as you can get to try to really memorize like what you're looking for and be able to pick up those different elements of each style.
Yeah, I agree. And that was something that studying for master, like you said, you can, or really for any level, you have a little bit of a lot of different beers, and that can get very expensive. So one thing I did was, if it was a bottle, I have little corks that I can put in there. You can buy like little can savers that are specifically for like soda and beer cans that make a little seal on top. And again, it's not going to be like beer in the very best condition by like day 2 or 3, but that was a way to stretch out your beer so you're not, tasting 2 ounces and pouring 10 ounces down the drain. So the last thing I will show all of you watching is this is my email. If you have questions about exams, about anything here, really anything Cicerone related or, sensory related or whatever, feel free to shoot me an email. I really encourage people to reach out to the program with whatever your questions are or looking for guidance, because we're here to help. We want to see everybody succeed. And, we can offer, guidance and support to the best of our abilities. So don't hesitate really to reach out to any of us. But if you would like to contact me personally, that is my email. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you to our panelists. I really appreciate everyone's time, and I appreciate everyone asking questions and all of the thank yous that we have. Best of luck to those of you who are studying for an exam, and I hope everybody has a great week ahead. Thank you.